Customer service, done right, can be your company's single biggest competitive advantage. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution. Join customer service authority and best-selling author John DiJulius as he interviews leaders who are revolutionizing their industries. This is more than a podcast, though. It's a movement. The Customer Service Revolution is a radical overthrow of conventional business mentality designed to transform what customers and employees experience. If you are a revolutionary customer service leader who's ready to stop competing on price and obsessed with building a brand that people cannot live without, this podcast is for you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Customer Service Revolution podcast. My name is Dave Murray. I am the senior consultant for the DiJulius Group and your host this week as we invite in David Horsager to the show. Now, David is fantastic. He is a trust guru. If you are not familiar with David, please hang in there and listen in because it's going to be a fantastic show. He has such fascinating information. If you're familiar with David, if you've seen him at our Customer Service Revolution in the past or seen him speak elsewhere, you know you're in for a treat. You know that he always delivers some incredible content. In this week's episode, we're going to talk about some pretty interesting things. We're going to talk about the fact that U.S. institutional trust has declined greatly over the last 50 years. We're going to talk about what a trust crisis is. We're going to talk about how lack of trust is very often the biggest expense that organizations have. So think about that for a minute. That could be your biggest expense right now, and you're not even focused on it. We're going to talk about the importance of trust and how that leads to engagement. We're also going to talk about what are some of the common trust issues that organizations have, and we're gonna end today with a discussion of trust and leadership within COVID that we're all dealing with right now, and also an interesting and unique view of what are some of the positives that have come out of what we have dealt with COVID, going through this global pandemic, and what some of the business results have been because of it. So I can't wait to dive into today's content. It is fascinating. Before I do, just a reminder, the Customer Service Revolution Conference this year, 2020, is virtual. It will take place every Thursday in the month of October. There are 5 Thursdays this October. Every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern, you can join us for the Customer Service Revolution Conference. David Horsager is one of our esteemed speakers, and the lineup this year is incredible. You won't want to miss it. So please go to customerservicerevolution.com for more information on that. And lastly, I just want to ask, if you are new to our podcast and you have not subscribed yet, please do. Wherever you get your podcast, please go and subscribe to the Customer Service Revolution podcast. We'd love to have you join us every week with some of the great thought leaders that we bring. And we also ask that if you like what you hear, please give us your comments, tell us how we can be better, and share with your friends. So thanks again for joining us. Let's get right to it. Let's bring on David Horsager. David, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm thrilled to have you as part of the Customer Service Revolution podcast. The history between your organization and our organization goes back a little bit. You've been a past speaker at the Customer Service Revolution. I know you have spoken for a lot of the organizations that we work with. There's a lot of symmetry between our two organizations that we'll get to during our conversation. But I just wanted to thank you so much for making the time to join us today. I'm sure a lot of our listeners and viewers are familiar with you, but for those that aren't, I want to go a little bit into your impressive background. So, David Horsager, you are a global trust leader. And I'm sure there might be some people that have not heard of you before that are saying, what exactly does a global trust leader do? And so I think what's really cool about what you bring is you work with organizations to build trust, to outperform, and outlast. I really love that about what you and your organization do. And we're going to go deeper into what that means in just a minute, but I want to finish giving people your impressive background. You are a best-selling author. You've written The Trust Edge, How Top Leaders Gain Faster Results, Deeper Relationships, and a Stronger Bottom Line. And then also The Daily Edge, Simple Strategies to Increase Efficiency and Make an Impact Every Day. One of the things that I love about your books is those subtitles. They make me want to read those books, right? When I first heard of your titles, and I did back when you spoke at our event a few years back, I wanted to read those because of those subtitles. I think they're so good. And I have some questions for you on those subtitles.
Hopefully the inside's better than the subtitle. But
it is.
So March 30th, the next book comes out, Trusted Leader. Eight pillars to drive results. If you just want the subtitle, it's just 8 pillars to drive results.
I like that. So the other thing is that I wanted to share with our audience that you are an accomplished keynote speaker, and you're also CEO of the Trust Edge Leadership Institute. And what you do at the Institute is, it's kind of cool. You publish an annual trust outlook study. So you're working deep in statistics and what's working, what's not working. And we'll get to that in a little bit as well, because I find that really fascinating. And then you help organizations implement their own enterprise trust index, right? So you're able to look at what their trust level is within their organizations. Again, I find this also fascinating. I'm sure our audience does as well. So we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But here's where I wanted to start. One of the things that you talk about, and I know is the mission of Trust Edge Leadership Institute, is to make a dent in the global trust crisis. And so that's where I want to start, because what I find interesting is there's a global trust crisis. There may be some listeners that are in it right now and they don't even realize it because they don't know what that is. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, I mean, in a macro level, if you go back in the last 50 years, let's just take the U.S., for example, and we deal with, we're on 6 continents. We deal with everything from corruption issues in East Africa to pro sports teams, worked with the Yankees, Rockies, whatever, to massive companies we've dealt with just this week. It's Walmart and others. So first of all, and I'm not saying they all have issues. Actually, a lot of times we're working with the best companies that are the most trusted and they want to be ongoing. But in a macro level, a couple quick things, because we could talk about this all morning. We do put out, I think, one of the biggest studies on trust and leadership that comes out of North America. The white paper that we do every year is the Trust Outlook, and we share this research every year. But from a macro level, if you want to look in the U.S., institutional trust especially has declined steeply. If you take in the 1960s or so, around 80% of Americans said they basically trusted the government to do what's right. Now that's about 7%. And so because of that lack of institutional trust in the institution of the political realm, that's why you get a kind of a Bernie Sanders and a Donald Trump, kind of the non-political candidates. That's why today you take the institution of food. People don't want to buy from the big box store. They want to buy from the neighborhood little farm right next to them. If you take the institution of education, there used to be very high trust in the public education system, and now more and more people are moving to charter and homeschooling. If you take the institution of the church as an example, almost the same number of people say they believe in God as they did 50 years ago, and yet any metric that would show that, giving, attending any house of worship, all those metrics are down steeply. So if you look at trust in institutions, especially, it's down steeply. Maybe more interestingly, the World Economic Forum, when I wrote the first book over a decade ago, when I was in China, these global leaders, said, we're not in a financial crisis, 2008. We're in a trust crisis. And funny enough, a decade later, those same leaders basically came to the exact same conclusion at the World Economic Forum. So they defined it as this trust crisis. So I think there's a lot of issues today. We can see trust issues in policing. We can see trust issues in big corporate, big companies, like this ethical thing, that thing. So that's really not our work. All we want to do is develop trusted leaders and organizations. We know that's what makes them the best. We know a lack of trust is the biggest expense in a company. When I go back to my grad work, 2 decades ago, my big finding, I think that was unique at the time, at least people thought it was, is this tie to the bottom line of trust. I can tell you, Dave, more than ever, I believe, without, I hope, ego, but a whole lot of research, that trust is always the leading indicator. Everything else is lagging. You take leadership, it's never a leadership issue. The only reason I follow a leader or not is trust. It's not a sales issue unless it's the commodity. I don't buy from a salesperson. I only buy from a salesperson based on trust, whether it's in the person or the item. It's not an innovation issue. The only way to increase innovation in creativity is increase trust in the team. It's not a learning issue. If I, it's sorry to get on a little rant here, but it's not the only way to enable learning in a classroom is increase trust either in the teacher or in the environment. Even today, in this massive challenge with diversity, that we have today, it's not a diversity issue. You look at the biggest Harvard study, shows diversity on its own pits people against each other unless there's trust. So you have to increase trust if you want to deal with the real issue. It's the same with engagement surveys today. Finally, best places to work changed. Engagement put trust as the number one metric. We've been arguing this for a long time. The only way to increase engagement is trust, not engagement. The net promoter score. Our research would show if you use an NPS or this question that would you refer us to others or not. The only way to increase referrals is not increase referrals, it's increased trust. That increases referrals. So if people want to deal with the root cause and the real issue, they have to deal with the root issue, which is trust. And if they do, they start to see results because, the question everybody's asking about everybody is not, do I like you? I got friends I like a lot I wouldn't go into business with. The question everybody's asking is, can I trust you?
Yeah. As you're speaking, David, it's amazing how you work with businesses primarily, although I know you do a lot of other things in other organizations, but businesses primarily. But it really touches every aspect of our lives, talking about some of the things that are going on right now in our country.
Well, we say it all the time. You're right, first of all, but we also say organizations don't change. Only individuals do. But when an individual changes, then a team, a company, even a country can change. And, I hope we'll see a dent in East Africa corruption because of some things we're doing, in the next, 20 years, but it's a big, all these things are big challenges. But when individuals can change, and by the way, that's why I got passionate about this a couple of decades ago when I had this epiphany around trust. And I start my grad work and it confirms it. And then we start using it in companies and that confirms it. And then the first book becomes a bestseller. And then but I started using it in my own life, my own marriage, my own family, and it changed me. And that's why I'm especially passionate about this because this trust stuff changed me. It can change you. It can change your company.
I want to put you on the spot here a little bit, and because I'm curious your reaction to this one. So, I know you have this amazing methodology that you have created when you help organizations focus on where trust is lacking and building it back up and help focus building leaders. I also know that you have delivered a couple of commencement speeches in your day. So here's where I'm putting you on the spot. If you had 5 minutes or less with someone who's just graduating business school, graduating college, and wants to be a leader, where would you tell them to start?
That's a great question. We didn't get that one ahead of time, did we? So if I had 5 minutes with a business person, I would try to show very quickly how it is always a trust issue at the core. When you can deal with the real issue, you can actually start to solve it. And then I would try to jump into how you actually build it. Our 8-pillar framework was just revalidated, my original research, by an outside university, triangulated revalidation of the 8 ways that trust is built globally. But just to jump into it briefly in this short time, the problem with many, as an MBA at least, many leaders are not solving the real issue. They call it something else. Like I said, engagement, made fun of that already. It's not that I don't want engagement or let's take communication. Everybody says that, David, because my funnels that came out of the research basically for clarity became C words. So these 8 pillars of trust are C's. And they'll say, well, communication isn't there. Shouldn't it ever be communication? And I would say, listen, communication is never the core issue. Communication is happening all the time. Clear communication is trusted. Unclear communication isn't. It's a clarity issue. High character communication is trusted. Low character isn't. It's a character issue. Compassionate communication is trusted. Hateful communication is not trusted. That's a compassion issue. Consistent communication is, inconsistent isn't. So if we can get to the real issue, so if I had a short time with an MBA that was starting a business, I would say, first of all, you got to start it, see it as a trust issue, and then you've got to learn how to build trust. How do you build it in the boardroom? How do you build it with clients? How do you build it in marketing? Because the only way to amplify a marketing message is increase trust in the message. So if you deal with the trust issue, you start to have the results you want. And I would passionately try to start with that. And then what I would take with that new MBA is say, you've got to start with yourself. You won't trust yourself if you don't build these pillars in yourself. And that's what we need as leaders. And that's a little bit what the trusted leader is about. How do I build these 8 pillars in my own life? Because this Ethan in this journey in the trusted leader has this epiphany of like, oh my goodness, this is I'm a good guy. I have integrity and stuff, but I'm not building some of these pillars myself. And that's why I'm going to lose the company. And of course, there's a turnaround that happens and the 8 pillars are revealed of how to do that. But basically, I would say you've learned all this. You know how to do M&As. You know how to do all this stuff from business school. You know how to read charts and what you've got to measure and close trust gaps. I mean, I work with a lot of boards now, and my big thing to boards is your biggest job is to increase trust in the business. Your biggest risk is to lose trust. So I would implore this in the 5 minutes I had of kind of the case for trust, how you need to see and solve the trust issues, and how you need to start with yourself.
Oh, I love it. Such great stuff. And I'm curious, keeping it on trust and what you're seeing in organizations. When you administer your enterprise trust index, so when you're working with an organization and they want to take that and have their leaders go through it, I'm just curious, do you typically find similarities from organization to organization? Are there usually a couple of things traps that people fall into, or is it kind of across the board based on individual cultures?
Yeah, both. Both, absolutely both. And it doesn't matter what you find, because if you close a gap, you'll get results. And we've had people will show one gap and they'll make millions. Like it's the same company names that you would know. And let me just, for clarity, we've created, I think they're the best 5 ways you can measure trust in an organization, all the way from hefty enterprise trust index for companies of at least 200 people or more, usually thousands, all the way down to a self-assessment, which of course self-assessments aren't as accurate because people lie about themselves, right? But you have, Trusted 360, trusted teams. The middle assessment there is really good for just a team of 10 or 20 to really get a good grasp and show how can our team increase trust, so we increase effectiveness, output, and influence and all that. But the ETI, that's our most massive. That's built on my grad work overseen by 2 PhDs plus 30 years of Accenture data plus, it's very rigorous, but I mean, it also will absolutely show clear gaps you can close. And I guess there is one that comes very commonly that people can do something about. And by the way, we take all the data. If you look, I'm looking across my office and I see like our output from an index on a huge university and a big actually one on a big global company. We take that down to an executive brief that they can use tomorrow morning. Many people do big engagement surveys or indexes, and then they get overwhelmed. They get this big, we give them all the data. But the thing we do differently is our consultants read every single page, and we give them top 3 to 5 things they could do the next 90 days, top 3 to 5 things they can do over the next year. And then we help them. And the difference is in bringing that to something I can do tomorrow morning. And by the way, often some little idea, easy to implement, will have a massive impact. It's not some big change all the policies. It's this little thing, that's revealed that will start to build that pillar, which builds trust that leads to results. One problem we see commonly, and it's, by the way, I have this problem myself, and it is that under that clarity pillar, it is so hard to stay. There's often a gap of clarity, whether it's clarity in messaging, clarity in benefits of the product, clarity in expectations of the people, but there's a lot of frustration around some lack of clarity. So that would be kind of a macro answer to the question of that. There's people have huge challenges with clarity, even those that think they're clear, they're not.
Right. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I just wanted to take a moment to remind our listeners that this year, our Customer Service Revolution Conference that you have spoken at in the past.
Fantastic conference, by the way. Fantastic. One of my favorites. I mean, I'm 200 flights a year until a couple months ago, and 100 events. I mean, that is it's just awesome.
It really is. And we're hoping to get everyone back together in person in Cleveland in 2021. But in the meantime, we still have 2020 to deal with. And so I just wanted to mention that our conference this year is going to take place on the 5 Thursdays of October 2020. And it's going to be each afternoon, 3:00 Eastern time. And if you are an attendee, you can watch those at your leisure up to a month after. But the reason I mention that is because David is going to be a part of this year's Customer Service Revolution virtually, and we're thrilled to have you. Just in just a few minutes, people can get so much out of what you have to offer and take it back and make some really positive changes. It's really, really impactful stuff.
One idea that I'm going to bring this time actually is a simple, quick idea. And we've seen massive companies use it and say they tripled sales in 90 days. And it's the same idea I used to lose 52 pounds in 5.5 months. So it's actually one of the key ideas around clarity that takes clarity to a whole different way of thinking.
Excellent. Excellent. You made me think right there, David. I've been able to see you speak a couple of times and enjoyed it so much each time. One was at our own conference, the Customer Service Revolution. I got to see you speak at National Speaker Association one year, and always enjoy your message and always get something new out of your message, which is fantastic. One of the things that I've heard you say before that really kind of stuck with me that I wanted to just see if you could expand on a little bit is I've heard you say that you are a slave to your habits. And so I'm just curious how does that pertain to leadership?
Well, and just to be fair, Og Mandino's, that's a quote that I give credit to Og Mandino, who said it first. And I say that a whole lot of different ways, but the reason we're a slave to our habits is whatever we do consistently, we become bound by. And so what your habits are what you do consistently. They're your repeaters. We have enders, goals, right? And then we have repeaters. And repeaters create us. Repeaters make our health, our relationships, what we repeatedly do has this massive impact. That's why the consistency pillar is so important. That's the last pillar. You're trusted. Bring it back to trust. You're trusted for whatever you do consistently, good or bad. If you're late all the time, I will in fact trust you to be late. Right. If you don't wear enough, I say for fun sometimes, if you don't wear enough clothes, I trust you are Kardashian, right? So whatever you do consistently. And so that's why consistency is so important. So I become my body, my sales, my leadership, my family becomes a slave to my habits, because if I have good habits, I'm a slave to good output. If I have bad habits, I'm a slave to bad, and because those repeaters, they're our output. That creates, I often say this, and this is my direct quote, and that is, it is the little things done consistently that make the biggest difference, not the big things. You might get one big win, but that's nothing in a few months. The only way, it's the little things done consistently that really make the ongoing impact.
Yeah, so true. Really needs to be a focus in leadership, because those repeaters define us. And as you brought up, a lot of times it's the little things that can break that
and for
trust.
For your whole team and the DiJulius Group that is all about service, I mean, it's so important, as you know, because, I can have great service many, many times and then not have it. And it changes everything, right? My view of that organization, my view of that person. Or I had a deal with a big company lately, big company. One person made a commitment to me that they didn't keep. And that made me think differently about the whole organization.
Sure.
Yeah. So consistency, man.
It's interesting. I'm just working with one of our clients right now, and we're going through some net promoter score results and findings. And it's pretty clear when people are happy, they're citing great follow-up. And when people are not happy, it's the lack of follow-up, lack of urgency that is getting written down in the comment box.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, the one good thing I would say about that is you're getting feedback from the right people. Now you can do something about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I wanted to remind our listeners that you are listening to the Customer Service Revolution podcast. If you're new to us, please make sure that you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's iTunes or wherever that may be. And also, we'd love to hear your comments. So please share with your friends, leave comments. We'd love to hear from you. David, I wanted to ask you about the two books, and I brought it up at the top here. One of the things that I love about your books, I love them both, your subtitles. And so I'm just wondering, and we'll start with Gain Faster Results, Deeper Relationships, and a Stronger Bottom Line, which is from the Trust Edge. Just wonder if you can give our listeners an overview of what that looks like. there's a lot of great stuff in there.
Yeah.
So how do you start?
Here's the challenge. The challenge with trust is that it does actually affect everything. And it's not, we want to be clear about this little thing and what it actually affects. And trust affects everything. The only way to get faster results is increased trust, right? Think about this. What's the cost? If we go back to the cost, and I'm not going to give you all my grad work, but let's just look at the cost of, let's take a lock business. Why do I put a lock on something? Why do you put a lock on something? Because I don't
trust.
Exactly. The only reason there's a lock business is a lack of trust. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that lack of trust has two obvious costs by putting a lock on. What's a cost of having a lock on something?
Could be anywhere from a couple of bucks to $100.
Yeah, whatever. It's money. One of the costs is money. I have to buy the lock. But the massively bigger cost is now I've got to open it. And that costs me time. And so you have a huge... So when you say better, faster results, when you increase trust, boom, all of a sudden I can just go through it. I can just open. You think of those little, I think I talk about a stand, depends on which speech I'm in, but one of the places where I grew up out in the middle of nowhere, Minnesota, on a bean farm there was this little stand with veggies with the honor system. You just make your own change and pay what you owe. Now,
right.
If you can have trust, you just have a huge efficiency. You don't have to have someone stand there. You don't pay for an employee. And it's speedy. They just, boom, as fast as they want to buy it or take it, they get it. So it shows, when trust goes up, then faster results happen. And so do deeper relationships. Trust actually deepens relationships. And so this is the thing. Trust. So the trust edge, we define trust as a confident belief in a person, a product, an organization. The trust edge is the competitive advantage of being confidently believed in. And that advantage, in my estimation, there's not a better competitive advantage in business, life, branding, doesn't matter. That competitive advantage of being confidently believed in changes everything. And you get faster results, deeper relationships, and a stronger bottom line. And trust, people think it's a soft skill. It affects the bottom line more than anything else. So that's the basis.
Yeah. Again, I love it. I love the subtitle. The subtitles really got me to read the book. And sometimes subtitles, I feel like they're just there, right? But these were really impactful, and I'm glad they were. Not that I wouldn't have picked up your book anyway, but man, they made me pick up the book. And I want to go to your next book, The Daily Edge, where you talk about simple strategies to increase efficiency and make an impact every day. Mm-hmm. So it's really more about kind of self-focus and doing it for myself.
Yep. Very different book. Both of them became bestsellers and all that. And I'm grateful for that. But you got Trust Edge based in research, 300-page book, whatever. And now we've done so much more to add to how you actually apply those pillars. But it's an evergreen book. And I'm proud of it and grateful. And it's been great. Keep selling. The Daily Edge, that came back to this idea that, what? This is to what we just talked about. What you do every day matters so much. Your productivity, your output. And now I didn't ever want to be, and I'm not a productivity expert, but if you think of those productivity books of the 80s, and I won't name their names, but they're like 300 pages. I can remember reading 100 pages in, I still didn't have a productivity tip. I didn't have an idea I could use tomorrow. I'm like, right. They're so long, and it was supposed to be on productivity, right? And so I basically took 35 ideas that had changed my life, little simple ideas, and put them in 3 pages. And these were the daily edge strategies that I've used to give me this daily advantage. If I do this, everything from how to do the most important thing every day, to how to have a clear desk, to how to prioritize, to a couple really powerful ideas. One of them is called SEEDS, SEEDS. It's the way that people actually change a habit. Many people go to big inspiring events and they don't ever actually change a habit. But if they do these things, they actually have a chance at changing a habit. The how clarity strategy is in there. Our 90-day quick plan strategy is in there, which has been monumental for my life and others. So basically took these ideas and said, as far as productivity tips, as far as things that people can do daily strategies that make an impact right now on effectiveness, efficiency, focus, and but also without running over people. The other thing about the 80s productivity books was once you got into them, it was like, but I only have a 5-minute meeting, or I smash everybody in the way to be productive. And hey, our business is about people. So I want to be efficient. I want to be effective. I want to do these things I can do, but I also want to still value and be able to focus on people. Right.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah. So interesting and life-changing, quite honestly.
I will say this about the trusted leader, because I think the publisher just put it up for pre-order. If that's interesting to you, it's a cool and different type of really fast read, but there's some fresh ideas of how you can use the 8 pillars, all the work we've done, over the last 15 years to see, as an example, that strategy for, how I lost 52 pounds in 5 months, I think is in there, and just a bunch of these tactical ways that I actually can build these pillars today or tomorrow, different than either the other 2 books, which are great. But I think it's up for pre right now. If anybody's interested, no force. I mean, it'll be around for a long time. It doesn't come out till March because of COVID. But it's just Trusted Leader by David Horsager. I think there's a couple other ones out there, very similar names. So
awesome. Yeah, we will look for that. That's great to hear. I'm glad it's coming out. I'm glad it's on pre-sale. You brought up COVID, and that's where I wanted to kind of take our last question. Just curious, we are both kind of in our home studios doing this. We're all dealing with COVID around the globe. You and I are in businesses where we typically are traveling quite a bit, and we're not these days. We're doing our jobs more virtually than ever before. I'm just curious, in the midst of COVID, employees working from home, entire teams, entire organizations deployed from home, how has that changed what you do? How do you see that changing your approach and changing leadership in general?
Well, I mean, in a practical way, and overnight, our boardroom, 20 yards from me is now a 5-camera studio, and we're doing events around the world from there at a very high level. We had to be. People expect premium from us, and we have, I've got a person in studio. We just went through a whole plan of how would we deliver with 5-camera shoot and 3 people if I have COVID. How can I deliver still? How can it be safe for everybody? How can I stand myself up and how can we do this? So, we have to get creative too, as one example. One of the things, we'd started this way before, but the trustedgecoaching.com has a platform for reaching people really well, even virtually and even in the midst of the crisis. But let me kind of step back from this and say, let's just pause for a second and look at some of the positives, because in this environment, there are big challenges. We are humans. We do like to connect. We want to touch each other and eat together and that kind of thing. But it's also interesting. Some of the data, one shows that introverts are being heard more than they ever have been before, because they will share ideas online or in Zoom rooms that they wouldn't share if they were sitting in the boardroom next to those loud extroverts, right? Number 2, humanization has gone up incredibly, because all of a sudden the CEOs are sharing from in some cases from their bedroom, and their 4-year-old is running with their jammies behind them, and the cat jumps on their computer. So there's this. They're not up in the ivory tower. They're right here with me. They're from home too, or whatever. So there's a connection that way. Number 3. There's more, actually, C-suite folks are connecting with their people more than they ever have. I think the highest volume Verizon call day was Mother's Day for years. And now every single day since COVID really hit about March 19th has been double an average Mother's Day, according to Verizon. So there's some things that are happening with reaching everybody because of virtual. Of course, another maybe benefit is people have gotten a lot better at technology in many ways. But there are negatives. Maybe you saw it last week, the Wall Street Journal article that just showed there is this massive fatigue of Zoom fatigue or whatever. There's also some things showing, maybe being apart, not physically together, actually is wearing on productivity. And now we're seeing, people were very productive right away because, they want to keep their jobs and everything. But now there is more suspicion of, are they really working at home? Are they not? Are we getting the results we wanted? Are they not? So there are trust challenges in those cases. So in our short time, I'll tackle 1 or 2 and just say, if you have to go virtual or are going virtual, 1, you have to really find ways to increase connectedness. Okay. First of all, I believe in person is still long-term by far better.
Yep.
I wouldn't want to own office buildings right now because half of them are going to close. But I'm just saying, in person, there's value that is long-term hard to deny. Now, people can jump to virtual for different things, no doubt about it. But there is value in face-to-face and human touch and human networking can happen really well long-term. Doesn't mean virtual shouldn't or won't be used. The other thing, as far as trust is concerned, basically, with people working from home or whatever, instead of basing work on time, you have to base it on results or a metric that's achievable for them. And so, because then there's not this skepticism every time of, did you work? Did you do that? Have you done this? It's like, here's the expectation. And it's kind of whether you do it in 5 hours or 8 hours, that's what I need from you. And that's a win because you're winning on results. And that's a way out of the constant nagging accountability around doing stuff over getting output.
Great insight. And I like your focus on what some of the positives are, because there are always some pros, even when there's a long list of cons. And I think it's really interesting. And now the next step is, how do we take those pros that evolve from this COVID world we're in? How do we make those last? How do we keep them going when we're back in the office, that the introverts are still comfortable sharing and all those things you mentioned, because that's important.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. No doubt about it. Good insight. And we have some good wins that I think we can bring into this. And it's going to be fun to see what happens. Maybe challenging too, but it's going to be interesting. I mean, when you and I sit down in a year or a year and a half, I hope to come live to the next summit and we just chat about this. It'll be really fun and interesting to see. But the fun thing for you and I is, we get to lead the way in some of this. We get to help people through this. We get to help people be higher trust or serve people better, even virtually. And we get to help them make the transition to keeping that high trust and service as they move toward in-person. I mean, there's some fun challenges for those of us that like to tackle the big challenges in life. I think they're always trust challenges, but they're also service challenges, right? So, hey, we get to be in the room, As imperfect as we are, we get to be a part of this process. So, that's a huge privilege. So I take that responsibility highly. We need to be learning, open, shifting, flexible, so that we can help other people, many who are not any of those things, lead in their organizations.
Yeah, that's so true. Great insight, David. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. For me, it was a lot of fun. I'm a big fan of your work, as I mentioned. And so to have the opportunity to spend about an hour with you and just picking your brain and talking about trust and leadership, to me, it's a lot of fun. So I want to thank you for your time and remind our listeners out there that our guest today, David Horsager, he is going to be part of our Customer Service Revolution virtual edition in October of 2020. It's going to be every Thursday of that month, starting at 3:00 Eastern. You can go to the Customer Service Revolution Conference website for more information, details, to get your tickets. We'd love to have you be a part of it. I'm sure you're going to want to join just to hear David, not to mention all the other great speakers that we have lined up this year. But David is worth the price of admission right there. And remember, if you don't have it already, be sure to pick up the Trust Edge, the Daily Edge, and you can now pre-order Trusted Leader. We're all going to be looking forward to that coming out in March of next year. It's going to be a great read, I'm sure. David, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you, Dave. Really appreciate it and look forward to more to come.
All right, we'll see you in October. Thank you.
Get tickets now for the 2020 Customer Service Revolution Virtual Conference, streaming every Thursday in October. Each week features a new lineup with greats like Seth Godin and Guy Kawasaki. The earlier you buy, the more you save. Grab tickets for the whole team today at customerservicerevolution.com. We appreciate you tuning into this week's episode of the Customer Service Revolution podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know with a review. We love to hear your feedback and even feature some of our favorites on our podcast page. To hear future episodes, subscribe now on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening and for being part of the Customer Service Revolution.